Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to talk about my and Azure's history. So let's understand Azure from a past perspective and what we have today and what is probably we are going to have in future. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to show you a couple of timeline details and then we'll briefly discuss about it. So this is the clip which I have taken from PDC, and this is also available in public. You can get it in YouTube and Microsoft portal. You just search for PDC Professional Developer Conference 2008 keynote. And that is when Ray Ozzie announced Windows Azure. Back then it was coined as Windows Azure, and this was the moment when he announced. And that point in time, the Windows Azure division was maintained and managed by Amitabh Srivastava, who was the head of Azure back then in Microsoft. If you look into the history of the Ray Ozzie's chapter, who was the key influencer of building this whole Azure environment for Microsoft is quite fascinating. So Ray Ozzie joined Microsoft back in 2005 at the same time when I joined Microsoft. And he was part of the Groove Network acquisition which Microsoft made, and he started reporting directly to then CEO Bill Gates. And obviously, with this kind of great mind joining the company, like Microsoft, you can expect something amazing going to happen in near future. So Ray Ozzie started thinking about what we now call Azure and really build the foundation of the cloud which Microsoft runs today. And in 2008, in the PDC conference around October timeframe, he announced this Azure in public. And that time it was known as Windows Azure because Windows was the only operating system and it was kind of thought about like having Windows as a server and a desktop and in the cloud. That's why it was named as Windows Azure. And he also wrote a nice memo about entitled Dawn of the New Day. And Dawn of the New Day really set the context and the foundation of why Microsoft is doing that. So you have to understand, if you go back in past, Microsoft was always known for desktop operating system, that is predominantly Windows and Office products. But most of it was Windows desktop PC operating system. And why Microsoft is going into something like a data center, which is not its core business, could have probably raised a lot of questions back then. To clarify all those speculations around that, Ray Ozzie wrote this memo, and it is also available today in public, so you can go and read about it and his vision about why this was designed and decided, and why is a Microsoft thinking seriously around it. Microsoft already had a couple of cloud services available. So we had the Hotmail mail service for public. We have the MSN service. MSN contained many different things within MSN. So you imagine that the cloud was a business for Microsoft prior to Azure. But it was not the cloud as we can think today as a public cloud, but it was sort of like a cloud, mainly focusing around SaaS solution, right? Providing the end user uh, services like Windows Live or Hotmail, where you don't need to build an application, deploy or maintain the infrastructure, right? But with this cloud, you are bringing the developers into the cloud, asking them to build things for cloud and host it in this platform. So it was always focused on developer. And that's why Microsoft first came up with the platform as a service model, which didn't really start well because industry was not ready back then. Now everybody today talks about PaaS. They don't talk much about IaaS, though there are a lot of migration happening in the infrastructure mode, that VM to VM migration. But PaaS is something everybody is thinking about. So you can imagine that 15 years ago, Microsoft did launch PaaS only cloud, public cloud, which was meant for developers, for modern application, for people to build things for in the cloud, uh, fresh. So fast forward, in 2010, Azure becomes the commercially available with only PaaS offerings. So we had web and worker role that's mainly for .NET based ASP.NET application. We had Visual Studio plugin to build that application and push it to cloud. And I created a video also. So you'll find in my YouTube, I have one video. I called it as ancient video I created back then. I used to demo it to many different forums. It was not accessible to many people. And SDS, that's today known as SQL on Azure Pass. So Azure SQL Database, which is the official term, but SQL Azure Pass is something which clarifies things. So database as a platform as a service is was available back then. So you can imagine fully like we had storage, web and worker role, SQL Server, which completes the foundation of building applications. So when you think about building an application, you think about having these foundational blocks. I'm not talking about 15 years back. It was not as complex as it is today from an application building perspective. If you knew, let's say, one technology like .NET, ASP.NET, and bit of SQL Server basic queries, and how to connect that through ADO, .NET, it was good enough for you to build a complete end-to-end enterprise-ready application. So it was easy time back then. Now this was all available here, so you could pretty much use this familiar .NET framework, use all sort of libraries. You only had a template to package it up and push it into the cloud, but rest all everything looks same. In 2012, Microsoft announced virtual machines because a lot of customers and partners gave feedback to Microsoft that they're unable to migrate the application because the concept which was introduced back in 2010, it was all rewrite, rewrite, rewrite. So there was no easy as is migration from an application perspective. And if you have done any large migration project, even a mid or small migration project, if you are giving a proposal to the business that's going to rewrite that application or make some changes to the application, you will get a lot of internal pushback because first of all, it's an investment from a company perspective. It requires thorough end user testing to make sure all the changes you are making to the system are right. There's no bug, right? It's as is today. So all this takes time and effort. And that was one of the reasons why not many people moved their workload into cloud. People who are born in the cloud, building it for the first time, took this approach and went ahead and built their application in the cloud because they never had any legacy. But customers with legacy never been there successfully with their setup applications. And there was no good connectivity between, let's say, on-premises and Azure because we never introduced the virtual network back then. So it was hard to really have set up application running on-premises and set up application running in the cloud. Security was the concern because it was not protected well. We did not have all those firewalls, etc., DDoS protection built into the system. So all those things were kind of very early. So you can imagine like if you reach out to a bank like State Bank of India back in 2010 and say that, hey, we build a cloud and then can you move your SBI online portal into the cloud, they will only look at you in an amazing fashion, right? So it is it was a very early stage, but that built the foundation of what we see today. You have to start somewhere, and that was the start. In 2010, commercial Azure was the start. And after that, in in the year 2014, Microsoft has renamed this to Microsoft Azure because we had both Windows and Linux present in that, and we could find that it is like neck to neck competition between Windows and Linux operating systems. So there is no point having a name which is a very Windows only thing. It's not inclusive, I must say. So Microsoft changed it to Microsoft Azure. And then we also introduced something called Azure Resource Manager called ARM. So it's a framework, or it's a kind of architectural pattern through which everything works today. How when you, let's say, use PowerShell, Azure CLI, REST API, it lands to a common platform or foundation called Azure Resource Manager, and then further it interacts with the resources, all those authentication, authorization, who can access what, like what is the rate limit, can you run something or not? All those things are controlled by the ARM. Earlier, it was known as classic deployment or ASM, right? That was the classic model, and we got rid of that, I think, a couple of years ago. Now it's only ARM, right? So you do not have any classic resources available anymore into Azure as we speak today, but you could have few more legacy left into the system. As we speak today, in 2023, I calculated it's more than 100 plus services, and they're all GA, generally available. That means you can use all of them in production, right? So we'll not start calling them out one by one, but you can pretty much imagine like whatever you need. And beyond that, there are things like marketplace solutions, which are like Play Store in the mobile application world, where you have got application created by third parties and can use in the mobile beyond your uh, foundational mobile applications. Now, from my personal journey perspective, I started playing with Azure early in 2008 when we had an internal announcement to sign up for alpha testing for the Azure. It was early of 2008, and I took that opportunity and signed up, and I got selected. It was only not everyone who signed up got selected, but I was one of the lucky guys to got selected, got an early access to Microsoft Azure, played with the SDK, met with the engineering team on a regular basis, weekly twice, pretty intense. And Amitabh Srivastava used to come to the call to understand our feedback. So we have interacted with all the big engineering folks back then, gave them our finding, feedback, what we liked, what we didn't like, where the issue is. There were a lot of, let's say, friction around using that. One of the reasons I created that video is that most of the time, whenever I thought of running that as a demo, the moment I start uploading that zip package into Azure portal, it'll start giving me an error because that point in time the cloud was down because it was not even available in the production. So once I thought, let me create a video because that looks same every time I do it. So if I'm stuck in those kind of situation, I can play the video for the demo I'm doing, right? And then we did in India from Microsoft, we did present in Chennai, Delhi, and Bangalore. I missed the Bangalore presentation, but I did went to Chennai and Delhi to present in front of a large audience to talk about Azure. Probably in India, they might have seen Azure for the first time live in front of them in the stage, how it looks like, how it feels like. So far, it's a journey, it's an experience. I have got a couple of learnings while living with Azure since 2008 is that you start making the habit of unlearning. So there are a lot of things which went away which we spend a lot of time and effort to build our capabilities and worked on projects which I cannot really use anymore. So you let things go because this is a very ever-changing universe, right? It keeps happening, the new things keeps coming, old things go away. Always stick to the foundation. So think about your capability, your focus area. There are a lot of high-level abstracted services you can play with Azure today. For example, if I take the container world, which is happening on all the public clouds, you have a lot of high-level services available, which doesn't require you to have a deep level understanding of any of the foundational technology. But if you stick to the foundational technology, you spend time on understanding how really Docker runtime works, how you build the container image, how you do things, then that is applicable across all different clouds, no matter how that portal looks like, what kind of CLI tool you use, what command you use to deploy that container image. There could be a subtle changes, but the foundation remains same everywhere. So stick to the foundation. Stick to what you're good at. If you're a good developer, stay close to the development of it. Like for example, learn deep technology SDKs, for example, .NET. Spend time on Go learning Go if you're coming from that background. If you're from Python, spend time on Python, right? Understand that foundation programming language very well so that you can implement that knowledge across different platforms. So it doesn't matter if you're a good Python developer. If I give you a SDK, and if that SDK has to be deployed no matter in whichever cloud, whichever on-premises or in desktop, it's all the same. So choose that common area which is aligned to your kind of skill set, will help you stay current and give you a solid ground in this industry. So that's only suggestion I want to make today, is that foundation is the key. Anything you are learning for the first time, go a little deeper into it to understand and ask this question, why? Okay. You will find a lot of fancy stuff. For example, if I talk about Azure, there are cognitive APIs available. There are end user API. But if you are really deep into data science, you know those API uses certain algorithm. You probably spend time on understanding those algorithms and how they work, right? You probably go at that statistics level, right? Which not everybody does need to go, but if you stick to those basics, right, you will be able to stay ahead of the curve. Anything new coming up, it will not take long time because it's not something like, it's like that. So it's like having that experience, the baseline experience really matters. With this, I want to end here and thank you for watching this personal Azure journey with a bit of history, being part of Microsoft for some time since the beginning of Azure, right, till today. I feel privileged, humbled, and honored. And this is one of the things I thought I will share with you. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.